My in-laws went abroad and left me to care for my SIL's silent daughter. Minutes after they left, she spoke her first words. Please help me. What happened next changed everything. Here's the story rephrased for a natural, emotionally powerful, and conversational tone. You know that feeling when your gut screams something is wrong, but you ignore it for the sake of peace? Well, I did that. And it almost cost an innocent little girl her entire life. My in-laws, dripping with old money and colder than ice, abandoned their special needs granddaughter with me while they jetted off to Hawaii. Minutes after their private jet took off, that supposedly mute, bedridden 8-year-old stood up and whispered, "They want my $4 million. Please help." My world was instantly ripped apart. My name is Sarah Miller, and at 29, I was just a simple elementary school teacher, someone who believed in honesty and hard work. My classroom was my sanctuary, a place where I felt valued. But every time I stepped into my husband's family home, that feeling evaporated. David and I had been married for 3 years, and he was the sweetest man, kind, smart, loving. But he had one massive blind spot: his family. He'd avoid conflict with them at all costs, and it always left me feeling exposed. The Thorns were old money. Arthur Thorne, my father-in-law, was a towering, imposing man who built his real estate empire with an iron fist. He wore tailored suits like armor and could make you feel invisible with a single glance. His wife, Vivian, was his perfect complement: cold, calculating, obsessed with appearances. Her perfectly coiffed blonde hair never budged, much like the expression on her face. She was a master of the backhanded compliment. "Sarah, darling, that outfit is so brave of you. I could never pull off something so casual at a formal dinner."
Ouch.
Then there was Catherine, David's older sister, Clara's mother. At 35, she'd never worked a day in her life, floating on a trust fund and family connections. She had Clara in her 20s, with some guy who vanished before the birth. Catherine was beautiful, entitled, and utterly irresponsible. She treated her daughter more like an expensive accessory than a human being. Richard, David's older brother, was a corporate lawyer, a carbon copy of his father. He rarely even looked at me, as if acknowledging my existence might somehow lower his status. And then there was David, caught in the middle, always seeking their approval, always trying to keep the peace between them and me. More often than not, I felt like I was losing the tug-of-war for his loyalty. From day one, they treated me like an outsider. My middle-class background, my career as a public school teacher, they viewed it all with thinly veiled disdain. Nothing I did was ever good enough. My cooking was quaint, my home simple, my career noble, but impractical. Every family gathering was an exercise in biting my tongue, all for David's sake. And then there was Clara. According to the Thorns, she was born with a severe neurological disorder, unable to speak or move, needing constant care. I'd seen her at family gatherings, always in her wheelchair, a blank stare on her face, never responding. But there was something about her eyes. They seemed alert, intelligent. I dismiss it, of course. I wasn't a doctor, and the Thorns had supposedly consulted the best specialists in the country. 3 days before their Hawaiian getaway, Vivian called. Not to ask, but to inform. "Sarah, darling, we need you to watch Clara while we're away," she cooed, her tone leaving no room for argument. "What about her nurses?" I asked, already knowing I was being played. "Oh, we had to let them go. Such unreliable people. Besides, family should take care of family." David already agreed. Of course he had, without asking me. When I confronted David, he gave me his most apologetic look. "Babe, they really need our help. It's just for 2 weeks. We can stay in the guest suite. It's practically our own apartment." I pushed back. "My job? I can't abandon my students mid-semester." He had an answer for that too. "It's spring break next week, and Mom said Dad would call the superintendent for the second week. You know, he's a major donor." There it was. The Thorn way. Rules didn't apply to them. Obligations bent to their will with a phone call and a checkbook. I reluctantly agreed. Not because I wanted to, but because refusing would ignite a family war David simply wasn't prepared to fight. The day before they left, we moved into the Thorne mansion. Catherine gave me a whirlwind crash course in Clara's care. She needs her medication 3 times a day. Don't miss a dose, or she gets difficult, Catherine explained, barely glancing at her daughter as she packed designer bikinis. Difficult how? I asked. Just trust me. Keep her on schedule. She handed me a thick binder. Everything's in here. Feeding, meds, emergency contacts, not that she'll need a doctor. It's all just for show anyway. That last comment struck me as incredibly odd, but Arthur cut me off before I could question it. Sarah, this is a massive responsibility. Don't disappoint us. The next morning, the Thornes' departure was a blur of luggage, barking instructions, and not a single goodbye to Clara, who sat in her wheelchair by the window, supposedly oblivious. As the cars pulled away, David hugged me. I'm sorry, babe. Dad insisted I come along for some business meetings. You'll be okay, right? I just nodded, a knot of resentment tightening in my stomach. He was leaving me alone with a child I barely knew how to care for. Standing in that cavernous foyer, looking at Clara's blank expression, I sighed. Well, I guess it's just you and me now. Little did I know, that simple sentence was about to become terrifyingly true. I wheeled Clara into the enormous living room, placed her in front of the TV, playing a children's program, just as the instructions said. I spoke to her gently, explaining I was making dinner. I felt silly, talking to her like she understood, but it felt wrong to treat her like a piece of furniture. The carebinder said it was time for her evening medication. I headed to the kitchen, preparing her liquid diet and the pills she supposedly needed. The Thorne kitchen was a chef's dream, all stainless steel and marble, probably rarely used since they had a full-time cook who was, of course, also on vacation. As I stirred my pasta sauce, I couldn't shake the feeling I was being watched. A prickle ran up my spine. I turned, expecting to see a household staff member. What I saw instead nearly made me drop my spoon. Clara was standing in the doorway, not in her wheelchair, standing on her own 2 feet. Her posture was a little wobbly, but she was upright, bracing herself against the doorframe. Clara? I whispered, unable to believe my eyes. Then she spoke. Her voice was soft but clear, with a slight lisp of a normal 8-year-old. They want my $4 million. Please help me. The room spun. I gripped the counter, certain I was hallucinating. The supposedly mute, paralyzed child had just walked into the kitchen and spoken a perfectly coherent sentence. Clara, I repeated, my voice barely audible. You can talk and walk? She nodded, her intelligent eyes now filled with a terrifying mix of fear and hope. Please don't tell them I talked to you. They'll hurt me again. I abandoned the stove, slowly approaching her, kneeling down. Clara, I don't understand. Who will hurt you? What $4 million? Her little face contorted with worry. My mom and grandpa and grandma. They pretend I'm sick so they can take my money when I'm 18. My mind raced. How could this be possible? An entire family faking a child's disability? It seemed too monstrous. Come sit down, I said gently, guiding her to a kitchen chair. Can you tell me more? Over the next hour, as the pasta sauce burned and was forgotten, Clara told me everything. Her maternal grandparents, the Davidsons, whom the Thornes despised, had left Clara a $4 million trust fund when they died in a car accident when she was 3. The money was to be held until she turned 18, with Catherine as trustee. Mommy started giving me medicine after Granny and Pops died, Clara explained, tears streaming down her face. It makes me feel sleepy and weak. When I tried not to take it, she would pinch me really hard or lock me in the dark closet. My stomach turned. They told everyone I was born sick, but I wasn't. I remember running and playing and talking before the medicine started. I felt physically ill as she described how she was forced to pretend she couldn't speak or move, how she was threatened and punished for any sign of normalcy. She told me how the family discussed having her declared mentally incompetent at 18 so they could control her inheritance indefinitely. How do you know about the money? I asked, struggling to process it all. Clara's face showed a flash of pride. I taught myself to read when no one was watching. Mommy leaves papers around, and I look at them when she's out. I have a diary where I write everything down. She led me, still a bit wobbly, to her room, a sterile, hospital-like space that broke my heart. From beneath her mattress, she pulled out a small notebook and several folded documents she'd stolen from Catherine's office. The diary was filled with the neat handwriting of a child who taught herself literacy in secret. The entries documented the family's conversations about her money, the forced medications, the threats. The documents included a copy of her grandparents' trust agreement, bank statements showing the massive balance, and most disturbingly, draft documents for a psychiatric evaluation that would declare her incompetent. I sat on the edge of her bed, papers spread around us, a storm of horror, disbelief, and pure rage building inside me. "Why are you telling me this now?" I asked. "Why take this risk?" Clara's eyes welled up again. "Because you're nice. You talk to me like I'm real." And she hesitated. "They've never left me with just one person before. Always nurses who believe them. I was hoping maybe you could help me." In that moment, looking at this brave little girl who had endured years of abuse and isolation for money, I made a decision that would change both our lives forever. "I will help you, Clara. I promise." The next morning, I faced a terrible choice. Give Clara her medication, as instructed, and perpetuate the abuse? Or trust her story and withhold it? My gut screamed. My instinct screamed. I decided to trust Clara. I made a show of preparing her morning medication, but poured it down the sink. I gave her the nutritional shake without the crushed pills, watching anxiously. By midday, the transformation was remarkable. Clara became more alert, her movements more coordinated. Her speech, slightly slurred the night before, became clearer, more animated. She seemed like a completely normal 8-year-old girl, albeit one starved of normal childhood experiences. "I feel better when I don't take the medicine," she confided, her eyes brighter than I'd ever seen them. "My head doesn't feel fuzzy." Together, we began a methodical search for evidence. Clara knew the mansion intimately, having observed everything from her wheelchair. "Mommy keeps important papers in her office," she directed me. "The key is under the plant pot." Catherine's office was a shrine to superficiality, designer furniture, fashion magazines, untouched business books. The filing cabinet was locked, but the key was exactly where Clara said. Inside, a treasure trove of damning evidence awaited. Financial documents detailed the Davidsons' trust, confirming the $4 million. Legal correspondence about the trust terms, naming Catherine as trustee until Clara turned 18 or was mentally capable. And most disturbing, a folder labeled Clara's condition. Inside were medical records, clearly falsified, prescribing powerful sedatives and muscle relaxants. These were the medications that would make an active child appear listless and immobile. "Look," Clara pointed to a document I'd missed. Her original birth record and early pediatric reports. They showed a perfectly healthy baby with normal development up to age 3. Then, a sudden, dramatic regression, precisely coinciding with the death of her maternal grandparents. My blood ran cold. Clara then led me to her bedroom and pointed to nearly invisible small devices in the upper corners. "They watch me sometimes," she whispered, "to make sure I'm being good." Surveillance cameras. The family monitored this child like a prisoner. As we dug deeper, Clara shared horrifying details. Catherine pinching or twisting her arm if she showed awareness, Arthur entering her room late at night to remind her what would happen if she ever revealed their secret, Vivian parading her at charity events for sympathy and donations. "Grandma Vivian says I'm useful for making people feel sorry for them," Clara said with a wisdom far beyond her years. "She says it's the only way I can contribute to the family." My phone rang. It was Vivian checking in. I put on my most pleasant voice, assuring her everything was fine, while Clara sat silently beside me, eyes wide with fear. "Remember, Sarah, consistency is key with Clara's care," Vivian reminded me. "Any deviation could be problematic." "Of course," I replied, my free hand clenching into a fist. Everything's going exactly according to schedule. After the call, we continued, using Catherine's computer, which Clara knew the password to. It's always her birthday, she explained. We found emails discussing the trust fund, complaining about the burden of maintaining Clara's condition, and most damning of all, plans to have her declared legally incompetent at 18. One email from Arthur to Catherine made my stomach churn. The amendments to the trust are proceeding. Judge Wilson owes me a favor. Once the paperwork is finalized, even if the girl somehow manages to convince someone of her competence, the money remains under family control. Maintain the current protocols until then. We also found legal documents showing recent, unapproved amendments to the trust, which would give Catherine continued control even if Clara was deemed competent. In Catherine's bedroom, behind an expensive painting, we found a wall safe. Clara didn't know the combo, but I had a hunch. Catherine's birthday? Nothing. Clara's birth date? Click, the safe swung open. More financial documents, jewelry, and a USB drive. Plugging it into Catherine's computer, we found more medical records confirming Clara was healthy at birth, and videos of her as a toddler, running, laughing, talking. Concrete evidence. By evening, I had overwhelming proof of the Thorns' elaborate scheme.
But why?
$4 million was a lot, but they were already wealthy. There had to be more. The answer came when Clara showed me a hidden compartment in her wheelchair. Inside was a letter from her maternal grandfather to be given to her on her 18th birthday. It had been mistakenly included in papers Catherine received. The letter revealed the $4 million was just the beginning. The Davidsons were successful oil investors. The bulk of their estate, nearly $50 million, was in a separate trust, transferring to Clara at 25, only if she was mentally competent and had control of the initial trust. The Thorns weren't just after $4 million. They were playing a long game for a fortune more than 10 times that amount. As I tucked Clara into bed that night, in a guest room far from the surveillance cameras, a fierce determination rooted itself in me. This brave little girl had endured years of abuse, and I was now her only hope. We're going to fix this, Clara, I promised, smoothing her hair. You're not alone anymore. The next morning, away from any cameras, Clara and I sat planning. If you could have anything, Clara, what would it be? Her answer was immediate, heartbreaking. I want to go to real school. I want friends. I want to not be afraid all the time. She paused, tracing patterns on the table. And I want my mom to love me for real, not just pretend in front of people. The sincerity nearly broke me. After everything, she still longed for their genuine affection. I knew we needed professional help. After settling Clara with a book, she was a voracious reader. Despite teaching herself, I called my best friend, Maria Rodriguez, a family lawyer specializing in child advocacy. Jesus, Sarah. Maria breathed after I explained. I don't even have words. If what you're saying is true, this is one of the most horrific cases of child abuse and financial exploitation I've ever heard. It's true, Maria. I've seen the evidence. This little girl has been imprisoned in her own body for 5 years so her family can steal her inheritance. You need to document everything, Maria advised. Photos, copies of documents, recordings if possible. But be careful. These people sound dangerous. They've maintained this deception for years. They won't hesitate to destroy you. She promised to research legal implications and prepare for emergency proceedings. After the call, I found Clara anxious. Are you going to send me back to them? She asked, her voice small. I knelt beside her. Absolutely not. We're going to make sure you're safe and nobody ever hurts you again. Over the next few days, we built a routine. We gathered evidence. Photos of documents, files uploaded to a secure cloud. Maria set up, Clara documenting her experiences in a journal. I learned about the surveillance, cameras everywhere, but we found blind spots for our sensitive conversations. We researched child abuse laws, inheritance regulations. What the Thorns were doing was not just cruel, it was criminal. Every evening, the family called. I maintained the charade, reporting Clara was following her routines, taking her medication. Meanwhile, Clara, free from sedatives, blossomed. Her movements coordinated, her personality emerging. She was funny, curious, incredibly resilient. The question of telling David gnawed at me. He was my husband. I wanted to believe he wasn't complicit. But his blind loyalty made me hesitate. 5 days in, I tested the waters. I called David while Clara napped. "Hey, how's Hawaii?" I asked, keeping my tone light. "Amazing. Dad's meetings finished early, so we've been hitting the beach." "How are things with Clara?" I took a deep breath. "Actually, I've noticed some strange things. Her medical regimen seems extreme, and I found some documents about her trust fund that seem concerning." There was a pause. Then David's voice, noticeably cooler. "Sarah, you know nothing about Clara's condition. The medication is necessary, and her financial arrangements are none of your business." I tried again. "But David, don't you think? Look, Catherine knows what's best for her daughter. Just follow the instructions and stop snooping through family papers." "That's totally inappropriate." His dismissive response confirmed my worst fears. Whether actively complicit or willfully ignorant, he couldn't be trusted. "You're right. I lied. I'm sorry. I'm just trying to do my best here." Hanging up, I sat in silence. My resolve hardened. I was on my own. Me and an 8-year-old girl against a powerful, wealthy family willing to destroy a child for money. During our week, I focused on giving Clara the normal childhood she'd been denied. We baked cookies, played board games, watched age-appropriate movies. "No one's ever played with me before," she admitted during a game of Go Fish. "They just put me in front of the TV." I taught her card games, amazed at how quickly she learned. I also worked with her on self-advocacy, preparing her for possible interviews with authorities. "Remember, you've done nothing wrong," I emphasized. "The adults who were supposed to protect you failed. None of this is your fault." Maria provided guidance for the family's return. We secured copies of all evidence in multiple locations. We developed a code phrase Clara could use if she felt unsafe. I bought a small burner phone and hid it in her room with emergency numbers. The night before the Thorns were due back, Clara and I finalized preparations. The evidence was overwhelming. Medical records, falsified reports, financial documents, emails, videos, and Clara's testimony. As we ate ice cream, another simple pleasure Clara had been denied, she looked at me with serious eyes. "What if they don't believe us? What if they make me go back to pretending?" I squeezed her hand. "That's not going to happen. Too many people know the truth now. You're not alone anymore." What I didn't tell her was my fear, that the Thorns' wealth and connections might still prevail, that justice wasn't always served. But I was determined to fight with everything I had. "Tomorrow will be hard," I warned gently. "But remember how brave you've been all these years. Just a little longer and then you'll be free." As I tucked her into bed, Clara hugged me tight. "Thank you for believing me," she whispered. "Always," I promised, holding her close. "Now, get some sleep. Tomorrow is a big day." Little did I know, tomorrow would arrive much sooner. At 3 a.m., I was jolted awake by the front door opening and voices. They weren't supposed to be back until afternoon. I found Clara already awake, trembling. "They're back early," she whispered. "They sometimes do this, to check if I'm being good when no one expects it." I helped her quickly back into her monitored room. "Remember our plan?" I whispered. "No matter what, I won't let them hurt you again." I had barely settled her when Catherine appeared, still in travel clothes. "What are you doing in here?" she demanded. "I heard noises and came to check on Clara." I improvised. "You're back early." "Daddy's business concluded sooner than expected," she replied, her eyes narrowing. "Has everything been going according to schedule?" "Of course," I lied smoothly. "Exactly as you instructed." Catherine pushed past me to Clara's bed. "Let me see her." I watched tensely as she examined her daughter. Clara played her part perfectly, limp and expressionless. "Her medication?" Catherine asked sharply. "All given as prescribed," I assured her. "The logs are in the kitchen." Catherine seemed satisfied for the moment and left. I squeezed Clara's hand before following. In the living room, the entire Thorne clan was assembled. Arthur and Vivian sat regally. Richard paced. David stood awkwardly, avoiding my gaze. Sarah, Arthur acknowledged me coldly. I trust everything has been satisfactory in our absence. Yes, I replied simply, letting them make the first move. Vivian studied me, curious. Catherine checked the medication supply before we left. It seems several doses are unaccounted for. My heart raced, but I kept my expression neutral. I followed the instructions precisely. Perhaps there was a miscount before you left. Perhaps, Vivian conceded, though her tone suggested she believed nothing of the sort. An uncomfortable silence fell, broken by a sound that made everyone freeze. Footsteps on the stairs. All heads turned as Clara appeared in the doorway, standing perfectly straight, fully dressed, and very much alert. "Hello, Mommy," she said clearly. "Hello, Grandma and Grandpa. I'm feeling much better now." The room exploded. Catherine lunged at Clara with a strangled cry. Richard cursed. Vivian pressed a hand to her chest in theatrical shock. Arthur's face turned an alarming shade of red as he rounded on me. "What have you done?" he thundered. I moved quickly to stand between him and Clara. "I've done nothing except stop drugging an innocent child." Catherine grabbed Clara's arm roughly. "She needs her medication right now. She's having some kind of episode." "No!" Clara cried, pulling away with surprising strength. "I won't take it anymore. I know what you're doing. I know about my money." The room fell silent again. Stunned. Even more profound than the first. "Sarah," Catherine said, with forced calm, "my daughter is severely disabled and delusional. She needs immediate medical attention." "She's neither disabled nor delusional," I countered. "She's been pretending for years because you threatened and abused her." "I know everything, Catherine. About the trust fund, about the medications, about the surveillance. All of it." Arthur stepped forward, his imposing frame towering over me. "You have no idea what you're talking about. This is a family matter that you have grossly misinterpreted." "I've misinterpreted nothing," I replied, standing my ground. "I've seen the documents, the emails, the videos of Clara as a healthy toddler before her grandparents died and left her millions." Vivian tried a different tactic, her voice honey-sweet. "Sarah, dear, you've been under tremendous stress caring for a special needs child. It's understandable. You might be confused. Why don't you and David go home and rest while we handle Clara's care?" David finally spoke, his voice uncertain. "Jess, maybe Mom's right. This is a lot. Let's go home and talk." "There's nothing to discuss, David. Your family has been abusing Clara for years, and I won't walk away and let it continue." Catherine suddenly changed tactics, her face contorting with rage. "You bitch. You've been snooping through my private papers. You have no right." She lunged for Clara again, this time with a prescription bottle she'd pulled from her purse. "You're taking your medicine right now, young lady." I intercepted her, blocking her path. "Don't touch her." I shoved Catherine away from Clara with more force than I intended, sending her stumbling back against an antique table. "That's assault, James. Call the police. We'll have her arrested," Arthur roared, moving towards me with undisguised menace. "I wouldn't do that if I were you," I said, pulling out my phone, "because the police and Child Protective Services have already been contacted." The atmosphere shifted instantly. Arthur froze mid-step, his face a mask of calculation. "You're bluffing," he said, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Am I?" I held up my phone, showing them the call history. "My friend Maria Rodriguez, perhaps you've heard of her? She's one of the top family lawyers in the state. She's been documenting everything we've discovered." Vivian's perfectly maintained composure began to crack. "Arthur, perhaps we should discuss this privately." Before he could respond, the doorbell rang. Its chime echoed through the tense silence. Richard moved to the window and cursed. "There's a police car in the driveway." The color drained from Arthur's face. "Nobody say a word. I'll handle this." But when he opened the door, it wasn't just the police. Maria stood there with two officers and a woman I recognized as a CPS caseworker. Maria had delivered. "Mr. Thorne," Maria greeted him professionally. "I'm Maria Rodriguez, attorney at law. I believe you've been expecting us." Arthur tried to regain control. "There's been a misunderstanding. My daughter-in-law has been interfering with my granddaughter's medical care. The child is severely disabled and needs immediate attention." Maria remained unfazed. "That's not what the evidence suggests, Mr. Thorne. We have reason to believe Clara Thorne has been subjected to long-term medical abuse and financial exploitation." The officers requested to speak with Clara, insisting despite Arthur's objections. As the situation unfolded, I watched David. His face cycled through confusion, disbelief, and then dawning horror. Our eyes met across the room, and I silently pleaded with him to choose the right side. To choose Clara. The critical moment came when Catherine, seeing her scheme unraveling, made one last desperate attempt. "Clara has severe developmental issues," she insisted to the CPS worker. "She hallucinates and makes up stories. She needs her medication immediately." The caseworker asked to see the medication. Catherine handed over the bottle. The worker read the label. "This is a powerful sedative, Miss Thorne. Not typically prescribed for children except in extreme cases." "She is an extreme case," Catherine snapped. "Then you won't mind if we have her evaluated by an independent physician?" the caseworker replied calmly. Catherine's composure shattered. "You can't take her. She's my daughter." "A daughter you've been drugging and abusing for 5 years, I interjected. "You shut up," Catherine screamed, lunging at me. An officer stepped between us, restraining her. In that moment of chaos, David moved to my side, finally breaking his paralysis. He looked at Clara, who was trembling but standing tall. "Clara," he said gently, kneeling to her level. "Can you tell me the truth? Has my family been hurting you?" Clara looked at him with weary eyes, then at me. I nodded encouragingly. "They make me take medicine that makes me sick," she said clearly. "They tell me if I talk or move when people are around, they'll send me away forever. They want my money from my other grandparents." David's face crumpled. He turned to his family, who were watching him with a mixture of rage and calculation. "Is this true?" he demanded. "Have you been abusing this child for money?" Arthur attempted damage control. "Son, you're being manipulated. Your wife has filled your head with lies." "No more lies," David replied firmly. "I want the truth." Vivian tried next. "David, darling, you know Clara's condition. We've all sacrificed so much to care for her. Then you won't mind proving her condition with independent doctors," David countered. The standoff might have continued, but Maria stepped forward with a folder. "I have copies of all the evidence Sarah has gathered. Financial records, emails, medical documentation, enough to launch a criminal investigation." She turned to Catherine. "Including your emails discussing how to have Clara declared incompetent when she turns 18 to maintain control of her trust." Catherine's face drained of color. "Those were private. They're evidence of conspiracy and child abuse," Maria corrected. Arthur, ever the businessman, quickly assessed the situation and changed tactics. He lowered his voice, addressing the officers. "Perhaps we can discuss this matter privately. I'm sure we can come to an arrangement that benefits everyone." The implication was clear, a bribe. The lead officer's expression hardened. "Mr. Thorne, are you attempting to interfere with a police investigation?" Arthur backpedaled immediately. "Of course not. I'm simply suggesting that this family matter could be resolved without unnecessary publicity." "Child abuse is not a family matter," the officer replied coldly. "It's a criminal offense." What happened next shocked everyone. Catherine, seeing no way out, broke down completely. "It was Daddy's idea," she cried, pointing at Arthur. "He said Clara's inheritance could solve all our problems. The company was failing. We needed the capital. He said no one would question it if Clara had special needs." "Catherine, shut up," Arthur bellowed. But it was too late. He arranged everything. The doctors, the medications. "I just did what he told me," she continued, tears streaming down her face. He said it was only temporary, just until we stabilized the business. But then it went on, and I didn't know how to stop it. The officers exchanged glances. Catherine had just confessed to child abuse and fraud in front of multiple witnesses. Vivian, ever conscious of appearances, attempted damage control. This is all a terrible misunderstanding. We only wanted what was best for Clara, by drugging her into submission and stealing her inheritance. I couldn't help but interject. The next few hours passed in a blur. Clara was taken to the hospital for evaluation, accompanied by the CPS worker and, at my insistence, myself. David came with us, shell-shocked, but determined to make things right. Arthur and Catherine were taken to the police station for questioning, while Vivian and Richard were instructed not to leave town. The family's carefully constructed facade had crumbled in a single night. At the hospital, doctors confirmed what we already knew. Clara was physically and neurologically normal for her age, though some developmental delays were present due to isolation and medication. No signs of any congenital disorder. As Clara underwent tests, David and I sat in the waiting room, the weight of the night's revelations hanging between us. I had no idea, he said finally, his voice hollow. I swear, Sarah. I didn't know what they were doing. You didn't want to know, I corrected gently. There were signs, David. You chose not to see them. He nodded, accepting the truth of my words. What happens now? Now we make sure Clara is safe and gets justice. Everything else is secondary. David reached for my hand. After a moment's hesitation, I let him take it. We had a long road ahead, but at least we were finally on the same side. Later that night, as Clara slept, monitored by nurses who knew the truth, Maria updated us. Catherine's confession complicates things for Arthur. He's already trying to claim she acted alone, but the evidence suggests otherwise. They're both facing serious charges: child abuse, fraud, financial exploitation. Vivian and Richard might be implicated too, depending on how much they knew. And Clara? I asked. The only question that truly mattered. The court will appoint a guardian ad litem to represent her interests. Given the circumstances, they'll want to place her with family, but obviously not with Catherine or the elder Thorns. David and I exchanged glances. We could take her, he said quietly, if she wants that. It wasn't a simple solution. David was still processing his family's betrayal, and our marriage had been dealt a serious blow. But it was a start, a commitment to putting Clara's needs first. One step at a time, Maria advised. The important thing is that she's safe now. You did that, Sarah. You saved her. As I looked through the doorway at the sleeping child who had shown such incredible courage, I felt a mixture of relief and resolve. The confrontation had been won, but the battle for Clara's future was just beginning. 3 months after that fateful night, I sat in a sunlit courtroom, watching the judge finalize our temporary guardianship of Clara. The last quarter year had been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, therapy appointments, and adjustments to our new family. The Thorne family had imploded spectacularly. Arthur and Catherine had both been charged with multiple felonies. Arthur's attempt to bribe a detective had backfired, adding witness tampering to his growing list. Catherine, in a move of self-preservation, agreed to testify against her father for a plea deal. She still faced significant jail time, but less than she might have. In her more lucid moments, she expressed remorse, though it was hard to tell if it was genuine or calculated. Vivian avoided criminal charges due to insufficient evidence of direct involvement, but she was named in civil suits regarding Clara's trust. Her reputation in high society, the thing she valued above all else, was in tatters. Her charitable organizations quietly asked her to resign. Richard managed to distance himself legally, claiming ignorance, but his career suffered nonetheless, with his law firm placing him on indefinite leave. As for David and me, we embarked on intensive marriage counseling. His initial failure to believe me had created a rift, but his unwavering support of Clara, since the truth emerged, gave us a foundation to rebuild. He cut financial ties with his family and started his own consulting business, determined to make his own way. The most remarkable transformation, however, was Clara's. Free from medication and fear, She blossomed like a flower finally given sunlight and water. Her physical strength returned quickly, and though she had educational gaps, her intelligence and curiosity made her a quick study. The court appointed a respected financial manager as the new trustee for her inheritance, with strict oversight. The larger inheritance, waiting at 25, was confirmed, securing her long-term future. Therapy helped Clara process her trauma, though the road to full emotional recovery would be long. Some nights, she still woke with nightmares, calling out in fear that her mother or grandfather was coming to punish her. On those nights, I'd sit with her, reassuring her she was safe, that no one would hurt her again. We enrolled her in a small private academy, experienced with children from unusual backgrounds. After initial adjustments, she made friends and participated in normal childhood activities. Her first sleepover was a milestone, celebrated with ice cream and a movie marathon. As the judge signed the final guardianship papers, Clara squeezed my hand, her face shining with hope. "It's official now," she whispered. "It's official," I confirmed. "You're staying with us." Outside the courtroom, Maria met us with a smile. "Congratulations. The hard part is over." "Is it ever really over?" I asked quietly, thinking of the years of healing still ahead. "The worst is," she assured me. "You gave her a future, Sarah. Not many people would have had the courage to do what you did." Inspired by our experience, Maria and I established a foundation to help children in similar situations, victims of medical child abuse and financial exploitation. It was in its infancy, but we'd already connected with families across the country whose stories echoed Clara's in disturbing ways. That evening, we celebrated with a small party at our new home, a modest house we'd bought in a family-friendly neighborhood, far from the Thorne Mansion and its painful memories. David grilled burgers while Clara played in the backyard with two new friends. Their laughter was a healing balm after so much silence and pain. As I watched her run and jump, her face alight with joy, I thought about how close she'd come to losing her childhood entirely. How easily her story could have had a different ending if she hadn't found the courage to trust me that night in the kitchen. The next morning was another milestone, Clara's first day at my school. I had returned to teaching, and though we initially considered different schools for her independence, Clara insisted she wanted to be where I was. "Ready for your first day?" I asked as I helped her adjust her backpack. She nodded, nervous but excited. "Do you think the other kids will like me?" "They'll love you," I assured her. "Just be yourself." As we walked through the school doors together, Clara's hand in mine, I reflected on the extraordinary journey that brought us here. From reluctant caregiver to fierce advocate, from isolated victim to thriving child, we had both been transformed by the truth and the courage to stand by it. That night, after Clara was asleep, exhausted but happy after her successful first day, David and I sat on the porch swing, talking quietly about the future. "She asked me today if she could call us Mom and Dad," David said, his voice thick with emotion. "What did you tell her?" "That she could call us whatever makes her comfortable. That family isn't always about blood." I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling a sense of peace that had been absent for months. "We're going to be okay, aren't we? All of us." "Better than okay," he promised. "We're going to be the family she deserves." The road ahead wouldn't be easy. There would be more court dates, therapy sessions, and inevitable challenges as Clara processed her trauma. But watching her grow stronger each day, witnessing her reclaim the childhood that had been stolen from her, made every difficulty worthwhile. The most profound lesson I learned was about the courage it takes to protect those who cannot protect themselves. Sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone against powerful forces. Sometimes it means risking everything you have for someone who is nothing. But in that risk comes the greatest reward, the knowledge that you've changed a life forever. That you've helped rewrite a story that was heading toward tragedy into one of triumph and hope. What would you have done in my situation? Would you have had the courage to stand up against a powerful family to protect a child you barely knew? Leave a comment below and let me know your thoughts. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video if Clara's story touched your heart. Your support helps us reach others who might be facing similar struggles. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the most important voice is the quietest one in the room.